Joining us now is Adam Creighton, Chief Economist at the IPA. Adam, great to see you again. Let's start with what's happening here in Australia. And it hasn't been a good week for the Labor government after Treasury accidentally released a secret document revealing its advice to the government that called for taxes to be raised and spending to be cut. You have some advice for the Treasurer, and it includes looking to this guy, Argentina's President Javier Milei.
Cada vez que quieran ir a romper el equilibrio fiscal, les voy a vetar todo. Me importa tres carajos. Hicimos la reforma estructural más grande de la historia. Estamos exportando el modelo de la motosierra y de la desregulación a todo el mundo. Estamos haciendo un mundo más libre. Y si pudimos lograr todo lo que logramos con tanto en contra, imagínense cuánto más podemos lograr con viento a favor. Se vienen tiempos prósperos, se vienen tiempos libres, se vienen tiempos felices.
It's interesting, Adam, you've written about how he's managed to revive the country's economy by doing the opposite of what some of the world's top economists were advising. Talk to us about why we should be looking to Milei.
Yeah, look, certainly it's been an incredible success. He was elected roughly 2 years ago, and as you said, all these eminent economists said it was going to be a disaster to cut regulations, to cut spending, et cetera, and it's turned out to be quite the contrary. The inflation rate in this, in this country, which had rates of inflation of hundreds of percent basically for years, is now down at about 40%. Over the last 12 months, but over the last just 2 months, it's slowed to 1% a month, which is really just an extraordinary achievement of this government, because it really is the biggest economic cancer really is extremely high rates of inflation. And he's killed those, but at the same time, you've got the economy growing 7.6%, I think, over the year in the most recent quarter, which is extremely fast. And of course, unlike Australia, that's not built on people coming from overseas. That's actually genuine growth. He's had a budget surplus, and one of the really interesting anecdotes, he's really slashed a lot of regulation. And in the capital city, Buenos Aires, he slashed all of the rent control buildings. And of course, everyone said, oh no, rents are going to skyrocket, this is going to be terrible for the poor. But actually what happened, the supply of rental housing actually tripled because a lot of people brought their houses onto the market, and so rents actually fell. So just an extraordinary outcome, really, all around. It's a great achievement, and you don't see it kind of written up much in the press, and that's why I decided to do my column on it.
No, well, we enjoyed it, absolutely. It's fascinating what's happening there. So what can we actually expect to come out of this roundtable in August? Do you think they'll be looking to Milei? I doubt that they will.
No. Look, I mean, that was partly a tongue-in-cheek recommendation, because let's be frank, this is a government that's addicted to spending and regulation, and I don't think it has the future prosperity of this nation very high on its priority list. And so I'm expecting more tax proposals and very little on the spending side in terms of restraint. We've had the fastest growth in spending since the Whitlam years at the federal level. That's quite extraordinary. And even with bracket creep, and even with this new superannuation tax, that's still not enough extra money. They're going to have to find more, or the budget deficit will just keep growing. It's really a pretty shameful exercise. And also the other point is, you're a second-term government. Surely you have some agenda of your own, and you don't need to have a round table to ask people. So, I just think that's somewhat embarrassing. They really don't know what they're doing. And I suspect that leak you mentioned, I mean, maybe it wasn't an accident, and they just wanted to get further discussion of tax increases out there in the media, because that leaked document did say that raising taxes was one of the options, and I do worry that will be the only option. So let's see what happens. Let's hope, but I'm rather pessimistic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe it wasn't an accident to kind of soften the blow. Let's look to the US. Donald Trump reportedly drafted a letter to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. According to the New York Times, the US president discussed whether or not to dismiss him with White House lawmakers. We know that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had confirmed moves to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, that they were underway. He told Bloomberg there's a formal process that's already starting. This is what Donald Trump had to say about it today.
He's doing a lousy job, but no, I'm not talking about that. Fortunately, we get to make a change in the next, 8 months or so. And we'll pick somebody that's good, and we'll pick somebody. I just want a fair job. We want to see lower interest rates. Our country deserves it. We're not planning on doing anything. We're very concerned. He's doing a little renovation for $2.5 billion of the Fed, building a renovation, and they have a close to $900 million cost overrun.
Adam, this of course comes amid frustration with the central bank's reluctance to cut interest rates. As we heard there, Donald Trump was slamming the Fed's $2.5 billion renovation plans, and Trump did say that it's highly unlikely that he would dismiss Powell unless he has to leave for fraud. Adam, what do you make of this? The news has certainly rattled the markets.
Well, look, I don't know why Trump keeps talking about Powell. I mean, his term expires next year anyway, as you suggested. So just wait until that happens and then appoint someone else. But he's really loathed the man for the last 8 years, but he appointed him. So it's somewhat confusing. I mean, he was Trump's choice in his first term. He wants lower rates, but frankly, I don't think lower rates are necessarily a wise move. And you know, the same can be said for Australia. I mean, inflation's actually not that low. It's in the high twos. That's still historically fairly high, and it's an uncertain world. We don't know what the tariffs are going to do. And also, if you have super low rates, you just get large amounts of borrowing and speculation and stupid investments, and it's not necessarily a good thing. And of course, asset prices go up even further. You know, the price of houses go up even further when rates come down. So I'm not sure that Powell's doing a bad job. But as for the renovation, I saw some data recently that suggests it's actually more expensive, the Fed renovation, about 3.8 billion Australian dollars than it cost to build the Palace of Versailles.
Wow.
So it's the most expensive government renovation in the history of the world, apparently. Yeah. And I don't know whether the Fed actually deserves that, but it's going ahead. It's going ahead.
It's pretty extraordinary. Let's turn to the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and Donald Trump's position. The Financial Times has been reporting that Trump privately encouraged President Vladimir Zelensky to strike deeper into Russia. Citing anonymous sources, they claim that Trump asked if Ukraine could conduct more attacks if the US provided longer-range weapons, but Trump has denied this.
Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
Are you on Ukraine's side now?
No, I'm on nobody's side.
Why?
You know the side I'm on? Humanity's side. I want to stop the killing of thousands of people a week. I want to stop the killing.
Now, we know that Trump has said that he's very unhappy with Putin and that if Russia's president failed to agree to a deal to end the war within 50 days, the US would impose a 100% tariff on Russian goods and Russia's trade partners. We know that plenty of Trump allies have been critical about the president's decision to sell weapons to NATO to be used by Ukraine, but there's, of course, plenty of relief that the US is sending more weapons to help Ukraine in its fight. You know, what do you make of where things are at the moment, Adam? I know we've spoken about this before, and Donald Trump has attempted to make a deal with Putin, and it appears that it has not worked.
Yes, look, he certainly didn't end the war in one day, like he promised. But Trump seems to change his view on the whole thing every week or two. So I kind of take this latest thing with a grain of salt. I think personally he's very torn on the issue, and I think he's very heavily influenced on who he's just spoken to. You know, he's obviously got the kind of neocons in Washington want to expand the war, accelerate the war, send more weapons, but then he's got the MAGA movement, which doesn't really care much for the war at all, and basically wants the US to withdraw. So he's got these two birds on his shoulder, if you like. You know, what's interesting is about the threatened tariffs. A lot of media have reported them as putting 100% tariff on Russian goods, but actually it's not on Russian goods. The US basically has no trade with Russia. What's really interesting about this threat is this tariff would go on all the other countries that buy Russian goods. So China, so India, so Brazil. And I do wonder whether the US would follow through with that tariff. That is an extraordinary threat to basically say to a sovereign nation, if you buy from this other country, then we're going to basically put 100% tariff on you. I mean, that's kind of wild stuff. I don't know if that's happened actually in world history, at least not to that extent. So I do wonder whether they'd follow through. And of course, Russia has just shrugged it off. The 50 days is interesting too. 50 days is quite a long time. So kind of in a military sense. So I don't know why he settled on 50 days. But look, let's just wait and see. I have no doubt that we'll be talking about this again in the coming months.
Yes, absolutely. A top aide to former First Lady Jill Biden has pleaded the Fifth Amendment, opting not to answer any questions regarding former President Joe Biden's health and cognitive state during his term in the White House. Anthony Bernal, who was Jill Biden's chief of staff, was asked if President Biden was fit to exercise the duty of president. He was asked, did President Biden ever instruct you to lie about his health? And he did not want to answer. And Adam, this comes just days after the former president's doctor, Kevin O'Connor, also pleaded the Fifth Amendment, deciding not to answer questions about Biden's health or cognitive abilities while in the White House. Are you surprised?
Well, no. Look, I mean, it seems like it was even worse, I think, than many of us suspected when Biden was president. I mean, you've got these fairly senior people who don't want to say anything at all. Now, it's possible that they're just treating the process with contempt, but it's, I think, more likely that they just don't want to have to lie, so they just choose not to say anything, which is their right in the US, of course. But yeah, the auto pen issue is just extraordinary. There was, of course, a Biden interview recently with the New York Times, and he hardly helped the situation by basically saying, yeah, I just gave an oral okay to some list that other people compiled. That's one of the most extraordinary powers of the US president to pardon people, and he wasn't really paying full attention to it. And it raises questions of, to what level was he engaged with what was going on in the US government? And as one recent constitutional scholar at Georgetown said, this is one of the greatest constitutional scandals in the history of the US. You had a mentally unfit president, in all likelihood, who was not really running the administration. Some other people who are entirely unelected were, and we still don't really know who they are. So it's it's an extraordinary chapter. Just a reminder too, Trump turned 79 recently, and is still very sharp, it seems, for all his eccentricities. But so it's not so much age; it's the mental state of the person. A lot of people say Biden was too old. Well, he's not that much older than Trump. I think it's more about your mental state and so
that's a good point, because you look at Donald Trump, you look at his energy, you look at how sharp he is, he's across the detail. There's no question who is running the country. Completely different story when you look at Joe Biden. And that auto pen scandal, as you say, it is just absolutely wild. It raises so many questions. The fact that the auto pen was used to pardon Fauci, members of the Biden family. The White House is now investigating this, but it's unbelievable. Adam Creighton, thank you so much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.